right? Like, I mean, I think it was. Oh, actually, you know what? We're gonna put it on right now. DL Hughley said that Donald Trump had increased his. He said black people chose Biden, and that they had rebuked Trump, and that he only increased his voter base amongst white men, and that's actually not the truth. The truth is, in 2020, Trump became the most popular incumbent in history and actually increased his voter demographic amongst every single demographic except for white men, which was wild. And it's never happened before, which is what gave even more credence to a lot of people that maybe the elections maybe they weren't exactly the most legitimate. So yeah, we're gonna check that out. Darren, what's going on, man? Thank you. Do you think those behind Seth Rich's murder will be held to account? Nope. I'll just go ahead and give the honest answer to that one. Not anytime soon. I'll put it like that. Maybe, but not anytime soon. Will not be anytime soon. That's just because I feel like that's a conspiracy. There's going to be it will be a lot of people involved, and it won't be till after those people die that they'll be allowed to investigate that to the degree that they should and hold people accountable. Maybe it'll be like one of those posthumous prosecutions. Those happen, but it won't be in any way that puts anybody in jail today. Let's look at this.
Today, there's a bigger reaction across the country about whether or not Biden should be on the presidential ticket. Now, Hollywood is weighing in. As we mentioned, George Clooney was urging the party to move on from Biden after the debate, writing in the New York Times, quote, "Our party leaders need to stop telling us that 50 million people didn't see what we just saw. We're also terrified by the prospect of a second Trump term that we've opted to ignore every warning sign."
Whether you like it.
So give Clooney credit for that. I'll give him some credit for that. Because he actually said what a lot of us have been saying, right? They're like, y'all ignored this shit. The signs were there. Y'all ignored it. And not a lot of people have been willing to acknowledge not just ignoring it during this election, but ignoring it for the entirety of his administration. So I'll give him some credit for that.
President Biden has had the legislative agenda that would rival FDR.
Oh, and yeah. So,
what did you just say?
Yeah, you heard that. That's why I knew you want to hear that one.
You like this or not, President Biden has had the legislative agenda that would rival FDR.
Made me want to cuss. DL.
Where to start with?
Hold up. Oh my God, DL, bruh. Do you remember what FDR did to Japanese people?
Hey, first of all, that's what I'm saying. It's wrong because he thinks that that's a compliment, which is like, no. I mean, FDR was literally a segregationist his damn self. So if that's what you're trying to say, like, so there's that problem. The Fair Housing Act literally is responsible for redlining.
Yeah, like what FDR did or didn't do for Black people. Like, why are you praising Joe Biden and trying to make it seem like, oh, he's like FDR? FDR wasn't shit.
Yeah, first of all, exactly. And the fact that you think that you're trying to because he's still living in a world where old Democrats believe that FDR was actually a democratic socialist and that he wasn't upon a corporatist. But I'm like, y'all do know, like, Nazis, they became like dominant and unaccountable under FDR. Like World War II started under FDR. He had every ability to stop it from happening. He could have sanctioned Germany. Instead, he made sure that the Olympics were held there and helped to bolster the positive image of Hitler. Like FDR was horrible. He allowed Henry Wallace to get cheated.
Yep.
We can talk about that. But yeah, that shit, there is so much wrong with him saying that. I'm like, that is not the brag you think it is. Also, the brag that you think it is, that is a horrible comparison because FDR actually, if you want to give him credit for the economy that took place after he became president, like he actually created a bolstering economy. Now we can argue about the fact, we could debate about how that happened, but there were some positives that came out of that. The problem is we are in the worst economy of my lifetime, worldwide. because of the decisions of Joe Biden in the United States.
Yeah. I mean, he's praising the comedy that benefit mostly white people, but that was it. Like, what about the rest of us?
No, hold up. And you know the difference between Joe Biden and FDR? See, FDR, you got to give him credit for one thing. If he gonna start a war, he gonna start a war that get us paid. Joe Biden starts broke nigga wars. He's starting wars. Everybody going broke. Nobody got money. We getting taxed. Like, it's like the white kid from school buying weed from the hood. Like, he paying 3-4 times what he should normally pay for an ounce because they're like, boy, you don't know no better. Going like, it's just like, we're going broke fighting wars. At least the FDR allowed a war to get started. At least everybody made money. Shit. I mean, that's just a wild statement. And I don't even know where to start with how wild that statement is, but it's DL Hughley. He is a funny guy.
And so I think that while people have the right to voice their opinion, they should be rooted in some level of sanity. If you look at where, for instance, George W. Bush and John Kerry were at this time in their race in June and July of that year, Kerry was 7 points ahead of him. If you look at where Barack Obama and Mitt Romney were in their race,
you read them points, bro.
October 16th, 2.5 weeks before that election, Romney was 4 points ahead of Obama. So, and the thing that those two people have in common is the power of the incumbency. So you have openly people advocating for a president to give up the power of the bully pulpit and the incumbency months before a presidential election, which is ridiculous. Historically, no.
That's not what the power of the incumbency means. Okay, whatever. I'm not even gonna go into that. That's just he's confusing that.
No president ever gave up.
I mean, when we talk about Obama, first of all, Mitt Romney and Obama, the reason it was so hard to tell them, like, the reason that race was so damn close is because we didn't know who the fuck was who. If Obama wasn't black, we wouldn't have been able to tell the difference between their policies. Literally. So there's that. Yeah. Also 90-some% of the black vote helps too. So
well, I mean, yeah, but I mean, at the same time, when it comes to the power of the incumbency, I mean, this just makes Joe Biden look even worse because, I mean, he is an incumbent. And the fact that he's losing, abysmally as an incumbent, like, his numbers should be way higher than what it is. And yet he forgets what planet he lives on. So, like, why are we, and I think DL's trying to say, well, we just need to switch him out. And I'm like, no, he is not saying that. That's the oh no. You know what? Let him talk a little bit more.
Hell no, man. He won the election. It's just never happened.
What I found, there was an interesting point. I hear you in the historical references. It gives great context to understand how these numbers can shift. But there was a point in this op-ed, and when he talks about how, and I'll read it here. He's talking about how there was new and upsetting information. He talks about, we all think Republicans should abandon their nominee now that he's been convicted of 34 felonies. And so I just wonder, from the perspective of the timing aspect of it, did you see anything with respect to President Biden and the power of the incumbency that would give you the same level of concern about Republicans trying to replace their nominee because of felony convictions and Biden's 90 minutes?
I think that I interviewed the president on May 29th. A few weeks before the debate at the White House and on Air Force One. Now, obviously, he's an older man. Obviously, there's no disputing that. But let's be clear. The Democrats should be focusing on what's at stake in terms of what they're running against.
You read them notes, DL. Read them notes. Them sunglasses ain't dark enough. We can all see it still. And you can't like turn your head if you're gonna fake read notes. We can see it still, but you read them damn.
One thing that I didn't hear George Clooney mention was Project 2025. And I think we have a decidedly different vantage point. If you look at who Project 2025 affects the most, it is communities of color. It is the people who have less than. Now, if you're a straight white male in this country, you could be disappointed in the election, but it wouldn't have disastrous results.
Now, once again, JB, you got something to say? I know. I see you stood up. I see see your hairs on you. You're standing up right now. Like you almost jumped out your chair. You got something to add?
I don't know. DL Hughley at his big age ain't trying to fearmonger about a policy that's been around for like 40 years.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, he is.
Like, bruh, where have you been?
Hey, to black people, he says it's black people. That's who. Once again, like we talked about earlier, I don't know one if it's any different than the Republican policies and Republican agenda for decades, but two, this is not. What is it that's, once again, we talk about getting rid of the Department of Education. That don't hurt black people. The Department of Education is probably what the fuck is hurting us now. It's the Department of Education that allows blacks, these schools in predominantly black areas to be underfunded. It's the Department of Education that allows public school funding to be funneled from public schools into private schools and private charter schools. I'm not inherently against all charter schools because I understand that there's special needs private charter schools, special circumstances private charter schools, but that's not what I'm talking about. We talking about the private charter, because those are actually usually more expensive or free. I'm talking about the private charter schools that already got plenty of money. That's the Department of Education allowing that shit to happen. So what we talking about? Department of Education was No Child Left Behind, where you get punished if you do bad and you get rewarded if you do good. And like, yeah, I'm doing well because we already have the funding that we need to do well. So I get more money for doing well in a situation that I was set up to succeed in. Nice. But that was what No Child Left Behind was.
And can we talk about why do we have to have our schools funded by property taxes? Why can't we start funding all schools across the board equally so that all kids will actually have the same opportunities, not just as far as their education, but also how much we spend per student?
Yep. It almost sounds like the Federal Housing Act was part of Project 20 or whatever, fucking 2025. And FDR wasn't born in 1974, but it sounds eerily similar. When to make comparisons to FDR, yeah, that's the problem. Is that FDR had a whole bunch of Project 2025 shit in his legislation. And nobody wants to talk about that, but that's who he is. And that is what we talk about when we say the Democrats will just smile in your face after they tell you to go drink at the other water fountain. That's the difference. That's it. That's literally the difference. The fact that people think that, do y'all know, I've talked about this on the show before, but JB, I don't know if you know, are you aware that so after the market crash, I don't know if you know, but the only banks that survived that crash were black banks. Did you know that?
I think I remember that. I think that, and as well as the Bank of North Dakota also shielded a lot of North Dakota from a lot of the big issues regarding the 2008 crash too. Yeah,
but I'm talking about the 20s. The Great Depression.
Oh, well.
Great Depression, yeah. Great Depression. But yes, you are correct about that too. But so the reason why is because they responsibly invested. They did not gamble. They didn't participate in the stock market's games because they could see where it was going, right? Yeah. So FDR, when he came into power, despite knowing that the black banks survived, forced them to close the same way that he forced the other banks to close, even though there was no indication that they needed to close in order to help the economy recuperate. It was to make sure that those black banks could not get ahead of the JP Morgans, of JP Morgan Chase, of the Bank of America, and the like, because the black banks were about to. I mean, and this is this whole process during this whole era. You got the Fed in the national budget was being established, and black banks and the black Wall Streets were able to compete with the country, combine their income. They were able to compete with the country when it came to the national budget. It's going to be hard for you to manipulate interest. It's going to be hard for you to sell this idea of the Fed. It's going to be hard for you to sell this idea of a World Bank or whatever if you can't compete with the black people in your own country when it comes to interest. I'm not going to go to the federal government for shit, or JP Morgan for shit if I can go to a black bank and get it for cheaper. And I know that they're not going to gamble my money away. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, that was FDR. Once again, he did it and nobody talked about it because you weren't allowed to talk about it. Hell, we weren't even allowed to talk about Black Wall Street until recently. So that's what you get from Democrats. And they still will sell themselves as the fucking hero. Mm-hmm. So
I think that's decidedly a different thing for communities of color. And I think that the vantage point they speak from, I don't think that he speaks for the people that I speak. I speak to millions of people every day on my radio show. And that's the sentiment I hear that is kind of bantered around. And so I just think the one thing I can say for sure is the reticence that a lot of young black men have with the Democratic Party is the cowardice at every turn, the hand wringing, the fecklessness, and they exhibited it all the time. And it's just a lot to take.
You know, I'm a fan of your show and listen to it all the time. And I want you to unpack a little.
I'm not gonna lie, JB. I actually don't know what the fuck he's talking about. I didn't know what he just said a bunch of shit, and I don't know what he's talking about. So I don't know if you feel want to respond to any of that, whatever he just said, but I understand.
More about what you're hearing on that idea of the cowardice, because one of the criticisms I often hear is Democrats eat their own, that there's a circular firing squad.
Absolutely.
That they attempt to have a moral high ground is to their detriment. And yet, there is something to be said about having a moral compass, about having the high ground, and about calling out wrong wherever it may be. But tell me about what you're hearing from people about how they view these last couple weeks.
Well, here's the thing. LBJ had the moral compass. He left. Richard Nixon became president, and that, for black people, became the onslaught of mass incarceration.
LBJ, the connoisseur of the N-word, had a moral compass. Yeah, you heard that correctly. You heard that correctly, bro. Bro, hey man, that's why, hey guys, you don't just take somebody's notes before you take the test, bro. You gotta check them notes to make sure they right. Okay, so y'all know that for the future. You're gonna sound like this guy. That boy using 2001 talking points, man.
Can we dispense with this really quick?
Go ahead.
This is why CNN got DL on. This is why CNN got DL on and they don't have Niko on. This is why CNN got DL on and they don't have Nick Cruz on. This is why CNN got DL on, but they don't have Sabby Sabs on, because they know he will keep you within the same system that screwed you over in the first place. This is why. And this is some revisionist BS, because LBJ was just as racist, if not just as more racist than Nixon. Because the thing is that they all run the same circles. They all run the same clubs. All right. LBJ was forced to do what he needed to do in order to keep things, quelled in the nation. And when it comes to saying that, LBJ was better for black people, he and Nixon were part of the same club. Mm-hmm. Why are we differentiating?
Yeah. Also, LBJ didn't pass the Civil Rights Act. That was Congress, and that was because of the hard work of black people and their allies around the country. And also the Civil Rights Act, he passed. Yeah, he signed them, but like even the Civil Rights Act, that shit ain't perfect, right? Like it is not. When you talk about the 13th Amendment, everybody talks. We know, like the moment that you go to jail or that you become a felon, now you go from equal rights to a slave once again. And then they proceeded to put a bunch of black people in jail. So like. And he could have vetoed that and said, "Nah, we can't allow that." But I mean, LBJ was known as a connoisseur of the N-word. That is a direct quote. He was known as a connoisseur. He would just throw that shit around the White House, bro. Everybody knows that LBJ was racist, but like I said, man, DL is out here using 2001 fucking talking points. They didn't even give him the iOS update before he came on his interview.
And the war on drugs. It had disastrous consequences for black people. When Donald Trump won, it had disastrous consequences for black people. If you look at who suffered the most under those policies, if you look at his COVID reaction, who died the most? So this, for me, is not a whimsical conversation. For me, it's not a conversation about what is uncomfortable.
Hold on, did we die the most during? I don't think that we had the highest death rate during COVID. I think we had. I mean, there was a death rate that was high from COVID, but it won't from actual COVID. It's from that other stuff, from the science juice. Was affecting I don't know if that was, I mean,
look,
go ahead.
Either way, when people, I don't even want to get into the pandemic stuff, to be honest with you, because you got to be very careful. But I mean,
that's true.
Stuff that the Trump, a lot of right wingers were saying when Biden was pushing the jab, it's the same thing that Biden and the Democrats were saying when Trump was pushing the jab before he got left office. So they're both the same. They're both complicit in, the dropping the ball on the pandemic response. So that's all I'm going to say.
Yeah.
Both
sides, and the pharmaceutical takeover.
Listen, and the deaths that happen to people.
Hey, I'm gonna say like Whitney Webb said earlier today. She called that man Donald Trump Poppy Warp Speed. I almost lost my shit, bro. I said I was drinking coffee and milk, but Whitney Webb been in Latin America so long. She talking about Poppy Warp Speed. I was drinking coffee and milk, but by the time I read the tweet, it turned to cafe con leche. That's why I know she did not just call this man Poppy Warp Speed. I know she did not just call this man Poppy Warp.
It is what is necessary. Look at Project 2025 and tell me for sure. I watched the mass media and no one has interviewed anybody seriously with the fervor about Biden's age that they do about Project 2025. No one. No one. And who?
What did he say? Did you understand what he said? I heard something about 2025 and age in an interview. He having some trouble his damn self. Boy, he might need to see a Parkinson.
The fervor about Biden's age that they do about Project 2025 and tell me for sure. I watched the mass media and no one has.
Oh, that's what it is. He's not finishing his sentences or his thoughts. He says a thought and he moves on too fast. So I don't. That's what I'm at. I'm like, why am I having so much trouble tracking him?
Interviewed anybody seriously with the fervor about Biden's age that they do about Project 2025. No one. No one. And who does it affect?
JB, do you think there's a reason for that? First of all, nobody's talking about his age, so I don't know why. And it's also funny because everybody keeps quote unquote focusing on about his age, which is not actually what's happening. People focus on
trying to get Bernie Sanders into office. He wants to talk about, it's about his age. It was never about his age. It's about his.
Yeah, the Parkinson's. Yeah, literally the dementia and the Parkinson's. But it's funny that nobody's talking about Trump's age because they're damn near the same age. And everybody keeps forgetting that. Why is that? If the age is the issue, why don't y'all bring that up about Trump? Oh, because it actually doesn't fit your narrative. Because the problems with Trump that we talk about have nothing to do with his ability to communicate, or articulate, or get the job done because of the capacity or lack thereof of his brain. So there's that. But there's a reason that the Democrats don't talk in depth about Project 2025. JB? Do they talk in depth about any of hell? Do they talk in depth about any of Biden's policies?
I mean, if we're going to talk about it, I mean, of course, part of Project 2025 is that they want to cut things like Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. But what did Joe Biden want to do back in the 90s?
Yeah.
I wonder.
Exactly. It's either you're going to find out Biden supported that. It hasn't done anything to move anybody or their opinion about him in those policies, or you'll find out, oh shit, hold up, so these are just policies that Republicans have already been wanting. So you're just saying Project 2025 because the Republican agenda isn't scary enough anymore, or it isn't working because Trump and MAGA and Russia isn't working anymore. So you just had to come up with another buzzword. Maybe that's why nobody's doing in-depth interviews about Project 2025, because they know if you do an in-depth interview, then you're just going to be like, oh, okay, so they're Republicans running on Republican policies. You didn't have to do an interview with the Democrat who read the book to hear what Trump is saying on stage, or like, so it's the same thing. So so what I'm saying is, are you going to offer me something different? Like, are you going to offer me something substantive? Because otherwise, shut the fuck up. That's basically because that's where I'm at with it. Like, if you're not going to offer anything substantively different, because Trump isn't going to get. I don't give it. So that's the other part about Project 2025. Once you read it, you just realize, oh, this is just libertarian neocon wet dreams that they will never get done. Because now you got to explain why you lost so many damn jobs under your administration, and those people are voters and their families are voters. And it's going to be everybody with a story about how this Republican got rid of this institution and got rid of that institution and lost jobs, and that hurts the economy. And DC itself would cease to fucking function correctly in a lot of ways. You forget about how many people the Department of Education not only employs in DC, but around the country. Social Security, how much they employ not only in DC, but around the country, right? It'll get to the point where they're like, okay, yeah, I know we said we're going to do this, but we're not really going to do this, right? Because y'all see these numbers, what it's going to look like. And they think about things in quarters. They don't think about things long term. They claim that that's what they want. They claim that they think about things in the grand scheme, but our country is run like a corporation. They only make decisions in quarterly statements. That's it. So it wouldn't happen, is what I'm telling you. Or else it would have. And the things that have happened, the biggest problem from 2025 is shit that is already problematic that the Democrats are not doing anything to fix.
If they expand or
go ahead.
No, I was just agreeing with you.
Absolve the Department of Education, who does it affect primarily? Environmental rollbacks, who does it affect primarily? All the things that are geared, if they DEI or if they Black history, who does it affect? Because the truth of the matter is in
now DEI don't talk about black. See this 2025 don't talk about Black history. It does talk about critical race theory, but that's another conversation because the way that critical race theory is being taught versus what critical race theory is two different issues.
Yeah, I mean, critical race theory is a course in law school.
Yeah, it actually is. Yeah, and all critical race theory does. The real critical race theory is just acknowledge Black history.
Yeah.
So,
really, if we're talking, we're supposed to be focused on American history. Critical race theory is American history. So therefore, why not teach it? I mean, the thing is, it's like if we're going to, what really blows people's minds is, we should have an age-appropriate version of that throughout all of school. But people look at me like I'm crazy for saying that. And I'm like, nah.
So here's the thing about critical race theory. So it's important that you pointed out that it's taught in law schools because critical race theory, because people always, it's kind of like, I guess, like the Democratic Socialists of America versus actual socialists. Or Black Lives Matter, the 501c4 organization that robbed a bunch of fucking people and got rich and wealthy, versus Black Lives Matter, who are on the ground fighting for the cause, fighting for these policies and fighting for reforms. There is a difference between the two. And that difference has to be acknowledged. When it comes to critical race theory is actually just teaching all of the legal ins and outs of how Black people have been affected by the system. It isn't this idea. It isn't like, oh man, this is how people feel about Black people or how you should feel as a white person when dealing with Black people or anything like that. It's nothing to do with any of that. It is actually literally the law. There's no conjecture to be discussed. There's no hyperbole or lack thereof. There's no emphasis on one thing. No, it is, this is what happened. These are the results and these are the numbers. This is what happened. This is the results and this is the numbers. And here's the policy or the law or the legal theory that led to it. That is what CRT is. Yeah. Liberals do what they do to it, but like it's important to distinguish the two. And people don't really want to have that conversation because it's not convenient. You can't put that in a 1-minute clip. But just want to clear that up. Go ahead.
And I'll say this too. I mean, if you don't like that it's taught in college class, CRT is being taught in college class because you feel like you don't want because you're white and you don't want your kids to feel bad. That sounds like a you problem. First of all, right. And second of all, I mean, if your child's not in law school, shut the fuck up. In law school. And even if your child's in law school, they are an adult and they can make that decision themselves to learn about that's history.
Yeah. I mean, it would be wise because it could be used in the case against them. If they are in law school, it would be wise to learn the theory because you're going to run into it.
Yeah. It is. And then on top of it, it's important to learn what actually happened to us so that we don't, those who do not learn history are doomed to repeat it. So we're trying not to go back to chattel slavery. But at the same time, it's like if you don't want people to learn about chattel slavery and all the horrors that was actually committed during it, then what are you trying to get us back to? Mm-hmm. So my thing is, it's like, of course, people, and this is one of the reasons why this is what the Democrats do with Project 2025 is what the Republicans do with critical race theory and talking about trans people, is that they use that to fearmonger to keep people donating to the RNC.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're doing
DNC, RNC,
no different.
whichever. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna say about critical race theory. Oh, the goal, in my opinion, should be is the same thing about DEI or affirmative action. If people would just shut the fuck up and just teach the truth, right? Because you got people complaining when the truth is taught. That's the issue. I don't want a Black History Month. I find it problematic that we need a Black History Month because there has been so much whitewashing of Black history that we now have to have a whole month to focus on it just to remind you, hey, we did some things too.
Yeah.
We were kind of important too, man. Like, you get what I'm saying? Like in Brazil, they have like Black culture, but they have like a bunch of different days for different cultures within Brazil. Like, and there is like a Black History Day, but you don't like get the day off or something like that. And it's like a day, and it's because of slavery. It's like an acknowledgement of the descendants of the slaves here. So that makes sense. But like, there is not an entire month dedicated to learning the Black history of Brazil because it is so completely and totally intertwined and woven in their education system and their culture that they don't have to separate a day or a month, excuse me, because it's part of it. You can't tell the story of Brazil without talking about Black history. But the difference is they didn't make policies that literally lie. I mean, literally lie. So now you end up with the overcorrection, right? Now you got to give everybody a whole month. Now we got to have DEI and affirmative action, which Black people don't even fucking benefit from. It's mostly the white people, or white women rather. And like, now you got to overcorrect. And then there's a criticism of the overcorrection without acknowledging the reason we even got to that point. Like, why do we even have to correct it? Oh, like, because people that they'll complain about critical race theory, or they'll complain about Black History Month, but they won't talk about the fact that, like, why does all of this stuff get ignored? Why do we not mention this in our history books? Because if we did, we wouldn't have, like, why is the only part of the history books that mention MLK and Malcolm X, they uplift MLK, only talk about the, like, turn the other cheek, without acknowledging the revolutionary turn he took. And also they talk about Malcolm X as if he's a bad guy and was extremely violent, and he actually didn't become a little bit more judicious and peaceful in his approach. There was nuance to both of them that they don't acknowledge. And what pissed me off more than anything, I never even learned about Fred Hampton in high school. I didn't learn about Fred Hampton until fucking college. We learned about the Black Panthers and didn't learn about Fred Hampton. Yeah. Even though he's one of the co-founders. Like, stuff like why do we even have, because then you find out the truth about your government, you find the truth about, who got advantages, or rather who was disadvantaged through policy. And then people begin to feel insecure because they begin to find out, damn, so if I fail, if I'm not as successful as I would like to be, as my peers are, it's my fault. I didn't have policies that were actually created to fuck me over because of how I was born. Mm-hmm. But that is the case with Black people. That is the case with redlining. Mm-hmm. Right, that is the case with the Fair Housing Act and segregation. I mean, the last case of redlining, if I'm not mistaken, was prosecuted in 2014. Guys, that is a Jim Crow law. That is a Jim Crow law. So they started to realize, damn, there are people who actually managed to succeed despite having the system work against them. So if I fail and I don't have an excuse, we're not even going to visit that. It's their fault. They're just playing victim all the time. They get benefits. They get handouts. They don't even want to visit the possibility that their failure, or lack of success rather, is because of them and them alone. And they don't want to deal with the possibility that their success came at the suppression of another person's ability to become successful. They don't want to admit that somebody might have got passed up on that job because of how they look, because of what religion they practice, because of what their last name is. My family is really big on names, and I've always felt like one of the reasons that I've gotten a lot of calls back for interviews when I was young, and I didn't realize how big of a deal that was. But it's because my first name is actually Greek, and my last name is is of German origin, but there's a lot of white houses. The black houses all live in the Midwest, but there's a lot of white houses in the South. So when they will call me for interviews, they were always surprised. Oh, you're Niko? I'm like, yeah. I don't know why that's a big deal, because they weren't expecting me to be black. Now, obviously, I get the job and all that good stuff because I know what I'm talking about and I know I know how to interview. But my point is, my friends, a lot of the times, what I like to affectionately refer to as my family reunion black friends. Okay, the ones that've been in the South for a long time. Depending on what their first name is, they weren't getting callbacks like that. They weren't, when they apply to places, they weren't getting the offers that I was getting or that my brother were getting. Because my brother's name is Quentin, which is a pretty standard name from England. It's actually an English name. It literally just means Queenstown. So like we have very unique names for Southern Black. We're not Southern Black people, but we lived in the South, and that affects your ability to get a callback, especially back in the day. There are people who got a job because this person never got the opportunity, not because you were more qualified, but because this person never got the opportunity. And people don't want to wrestle with that. I've already wrestled, like as a man, I've gotten jobs and gotten pay that a woman should have maybe gotten or deserved.
Yeah.
I've already wrestled with that because I had that happen. I found out in real time that a woman that was working full time at Best Buy when I was there, had been there for a long time, was getting paid less than I was. And I was still in high school working part-time. And I had only been there for like a year.
Yeah.
So I already wrestled with that. But there are people who don't want to they don't want to have that conversation with themselves, because then it can expose some insecurities. And we know God, they don't want to deal with your own insecurities, right? Let's get to the rest of this. I'm gonna let you get up out of here.
In 2020, it was the black and brown people that fired Donald Trump. More white people voted for him in 2020 than voted for him in 2016. Black and brown people fired him. And as a result of this, we have these draconian measures in Project 2025 and more rather than.
That's actually just not true, guys. I'm sorry, but he increased his voter demographic across all demographics except for white men. I'm just keeping it a band, guys. If you ain't got to lie about your enemy now. If you got to lie about your enemy, it means you gonna lie about yourself. It's just for yourself. Okay. Just tell the truth. You could have made the argument better, right? More people, like the black and brown people, chose Joe Biden. Why you have to say they fired Donald Trump? You could have said, you know what I'm saying? Like it's the way you deliver the message. But if you got to lie about your enemy, hey, it said a little bit more about you than your enemy.
Democrats focusing on that. They're focusing on the age of a man. By the time this is over, one thing is for certain: Joe Biden will be older, and Project 2025 will still be the platform that is running behind all of this.
Yeah. This has been one of the big criticisms that people have not gone after what are the obvious Achilles heels of one's opponent. And you mentioned that you also interviewed Vice President Harris, I believe, about a month ago as well. And I do want to get your take, given, Project 2025 has more than a few dog whistles, shall we say, and there's also overt statements that are being made. I said more than overt dog whistles. I'm saying in terms of thinking about it, and there are also moments when people.
Hey JB, I just wanted to acknowledge. You see how they got this black woman to interview DL Hughley, and then they focus on 2025. Kamala Harris, she's a DEI hire, which, by the way, I mean I'm actually in the camp that she is, but we'll talk about that later. But you see this. Bro, this was that production meeting was wild. They're like, hey, so we're gonna get this black journalist to interview DL Hughley and put up a conversation about Trump and make it about 2025 and talk about how Kamala Harris is a DEI hire. Dog. It's so bad.
People are using race and having those discussions to criticize the Vice President of the United States. And I want to get your take on something that she's recently been facing. Well, been facing for quite some time, but especially now that she's being named as possibly someone to top a ticket. Listen to what the former Trump official, Sebastian Gorka, had the nerve to say about her.
She's a DEI hire, right? She's a woman. She's colored, therefore she's got to be good. Yeah. And at least her brain doesn't literally freeze in mid-sentence.
Now, I don't know if you can see who's on that screen, but one of them on the right, I love Matt Whitaker, who is the former acting attorney general of the United States, with that smile on his face. What do you make of these attacks?
Yeah, so fuck Kamala. No, I really want to know what you got to say because I don't really care about what he has to say about it. I already know what he's gonna say. I want to know what you got. I want to know what your opinion is about that because I personally believe that this is one of those very few cases where you can actually call her a DI hire, and it probably would be true.
Maybe.
Like Candace and Kamala might be the only two situations that I can think of Popular Black women that are actually DI hires.
But that could be said as true. But that guy that called her a DEI hire, he's a dumb idiot too. Because if I would have went after her, I would have actually went after her record for what she did. But he doesn't want to go after her record because he actually would agree with the things that she did. So see, this is why I look at the people who are on the right as also idiots. Not the people on the right, but these conservative pundits and these conservative politicians, they're idiots just like the Democrats because they're going, oh, well, she's a DEI hire. That's how they are. When
never mention the record and never mention the record.
You could have went to what Tulsi Gabbard said about her back in 2020 and then reset that. And then you said, look, this is what Kamala Harris did. You know, she's not for Black people either. And then that would have made a way better argument. But these Republicans and these people in the GOP are just as dumb as the Democrats because then they'll say these things and then Democrat will be like, oh my God, you call her a DEI hire. Can you believe that? And it's just like, we don't like Kamala no ways.
But my thing is, so I still fall in the camp that she's a DI hire, but it's because of everything you just said. Because I remember I talk about what happened, how she got exposed by Tulsi in that 2020 debate and the subsequent, like she tanked in the polling amongst Black people. And yet and still Joe Biden decided with that he would focus on electing a Black woman or selecting a Black woman as VP instead of selecting the right record for VP, right? And then he went to Kamala anyway, despite the fact that she didn't get a mandate from us. Right? She didn't get a mandate from us. She has not shown to be qualified in any way. Because like when you say I want to select a Black woman, what does that generally insinuate? That you're selecting a Black woman because of her record with Black people, because she has a record of helping or assisting Black people. That record is non-existent as a senator, nor as an AG, nor as a DA. So why was she selected? Because of what you said. Only because you wanted to fill a quota. And a quota to get your votes.
Yeah. I mean,
so that's why I said go ahead.
Ben Carson was a DEI hire. We're going to talk about it.
Yeah. Well, no, what do you mean? Not as a neurosurgeon.
No, he was a DEI
okay. I was say not as a neurosurgeon because he damn sure went.
Where's his housing? Where is his housing qualifications?
Yeah.
For, when he was trained as a neurosurgeon.
Yeah, no, that's
housing. I don't know. Oh, I own the house. What?
Yeah, he won't qualify.
Yeah. Like the Democrats and Republicans both choose DEI. If we're going to talk about DEI hires, they both do it.
Exactly. And I guarantee that same pundit wouldn't have a damn word to say about Charlie Kirk explicitly hiring Candace Owens as a DEI hire because remember that controversy that he went through where him and his like little group chat with his second in command, we just got caught tossing around the N-word all over the damn place, and that shit got posted on the internet. And right after that is whenever Candace got hired because they had to prove that we're not actually racist. We hired Candace Owens, so we're not racist. It's like really.
I want to make sure I say this abundantly clear. I'm not actually against DEI. Mm-hmm. I think DEI has been a euphemism for token hire.
Yeah,
that's what people are using.
That's generally what they do. Yeah.
I'm actually for diversity, equity, inclusion. In fact, we shouldn't even need it in this country because we should actually start going according to the merits of people, regardless of their race. But because of the systemic racism that we have, we actually have to have DEI. So my thing is, I'm not actually against it. I am against tokenism. And Kamala Harris was a token. Just like people like Ben Carson was a token, right? All these people are tokens. And the thing is that both parties are using tokens in order to make it seem like that they're actually for you. And that's the problem. Like, for instance, I'm going to be real with you. Donald Trump doing what he did for Lil Wayne, that was token shit.
Yeah, it definitely was. He knew what he was doing. It didn't really help him that much in the election, but I mean, he did it for he parted he parted in Kodak too.
Yeah.
He fucked it up because he got charged right after. But that's Kodak, That's Kodak. But yeah, it's that's the problem that is the problem with any of these conversations is like they get so warped that now what it actually is gets confused with whatever Twitter says it is now. It's because people like I remember whenever Charlie Kirk made this absurd statement about like now I'm gonna have to question if I see a black woman as a pilot because I'm gonna assume that she's there because of DEI, and I was like, you mean the same pilots that all have to get the exact same qualifications before they can be pilots? Like that's like that was possibly the worst example you could have used. But it was the fact that he said it. I'm like, exactly. So in other words, you're more upset that you don't have the advantage anymore. Not upset. You're not upset that somebody unqualified might get the job or somebody more qualified might not get the job. You're upset because you don't get the advantage anymore. Whenever because now we have to go out of our way to consider the race because when qualifications were equal or one person was more qualified, the person who was not white was getting passed up.
Yeah.
That's what you're upset. Because Charlie Kirk's whole history is being upset because he thinks that he should have gotten in the Ivy League, but he believes a minority took his spot. That is literally how he got famous. That's why he focused all his energy. Yeah, bro, that's why he focused all his energy at the beginning of TPUSA on going to different colleges and bitching. The same colleges he wanted to get into that he got denied, he went to go bitch saying, they're teaching Marxism, they're teaching because he was upset he got rejected. And he was blaming minorities for it. Yeah, that's how Charlie Kirk. I mean,
see, Charlie Kirk is oh my God, that the foolery that's going on here. Because Charlie Kirk, if you're mad that you didn't get into an Ivy League school, you need to blame the legacy admissions rather than kids who are of color who got in because they kicked ass on the SATs. Yep. Right? And the thing is, how many kids that got how many kids who are black and brown have very low SAT scores, but they got in because they're black? How many?
That never, bro, especially like black women, for example. Black women actually overperform. Like they are generally considered they perform the highest on SAT. Obviously, Asians are like, I think the highest of the high, but black women are like, as far as the average of both SAT scores and grades, they overachieve in high school, and then they also overachieve once they get to the Ivy League schools. It's just like a consistent theme. So it's when he said it, and he's like blaming all these other minorities. I'm like, if anybody got a claim, it might be Asians, because Asians' pool of competition is crazy, right? I ain't gonna cap. They competing with the world of Asians who have ridiculously high standards when it comes to standardized institutions and like getting the grades and passing the test. Like it becomes an issue of, I mean, it's already an issue of money, but in Korea, for example, like they start paying for SAT tutors and just school tutors at an extremely young age. They pay their teachers their value. I'm gonna put it like that. You can become a millionaire as a tutor in Korea. So South Korea, I mean. So, but my point is that it always gets purposely distorted so that we have to now have a conversation about whether or not what we have to have a conversation about what DEI actually is, or have this conversation about a pilot, like, which is like the dumbest conversation to have, because you have to have a specific qualification to be a pilot, right? But that's on purpose. Nobody ever really wants to have the real conversation, which is like you said, and like I said, it's how do we even get here? And why aren't you upset about that?